and he'll drop what he's doing, and he's got 1,000 other things to do, and say, yes, I'll help you. So it's nice because it goes from the bottom to the top. And I think a lot of places it doesn't do that. Once you get out of this, I think it's a shock for a lot of people. I know that a lot of people who've gone on to other markets say it's really different because we do. We hang out together. We are friends. We go out places. We all go out to dinner, and so I think it's very different once you get to a bigger market because you're more looking out for yourself instead of helping each other out, maybe.
When did you decide you wanted to be a broadcaster? Oh. Obviously, you decided that before you went to college.
I did. Well, for people who know my mother, she was the speech and drama coach at Glasgow Middle School for years. So I always grew up around performance and speech classes and forensics classes and things like that, and really enjoyed public speaking. And also my mother was an English teacher, so I grew up reading and I really enjoyed to write. So I think the more I spoke with people, and Virginia Massey, who most people around here know, is my 7th grade teacher, and she really encouraged me to go to Northwestern. She said, I think this is a great school for you, and you can really concentrate on your strengths. So I think it was a perfect marriage for me because I enjoyed public speaking, but I also enjoyed writing. And most people don't realize that writing is really a big part of your job. They see you anchor, but you've really written a lot of that yourself. So,
well, that brings me to my next question. Do the person that delivers the news always write the story?
Not every night. Bob, I'll let you take that one since you...
We have a team of reporters that do most of the writing along with the producers. Now our anchors they just don't sit and read the news. They're out there and they're reporting as well. But most of the so-called grunt work is done by Allison and Leslie Perino, Scott Paget, most of our field reporters. And Allison now is taken over as our 5 o'clock anchor. It's her 2nd week into it now, or third week into it. And that's a whole new challenge for her to make sure she's back by 3 o'clock every day. She's got to write 2 or 3 stories and then get on the set to anchor. But the bulk of the writing is done by the reporters and a producer. If you see Mary Tyler Moore show, she's a producer, and she does that's her function. We have people who do Mary Tyler Moore role.
But then too, if that person is sick, the other day we had a producer who was sick on Friday, and there's no one really there to fill that gap, so the anchor produces. Because before Bob came, we didn't have producers for every newscast. Amy Bingham produced the 6 o'clock. If I anchored midday, I produced midday. If I anchored the weekends, I produced the weekends. So that's really a change that Bob has made, so the anchors can concentrate more on their job as an anchor, but also that they can get out in the field and report. Because before, we were really tied to the desk and we were tied to the station because we couldn't leave because we had to write all of those scripts. So that's really a change that has come about in the past. We used to write everything. Now we are more out in the field gathering the stories and bringing them back and writing maybe 3 stories.
What's happening now is that we're preparing the reporters and everyone, when they go to the next market, that they'll know how to do different jobs. And when they leave here, they're well prepared. I can promise you that.
I take it that, for instance, you've done some stories, I know, about the water situation in Russellville.
More than most people care to talk about.
I take it that anytime you do a story like that, you not only have been there, but you actually wrote it.
Absolutely.
Now,
Absolutely.
Is that checked by anybody?
Yes. We come back, we go out on a story, and we conduct interviews, and we shoot what's called B-roll. We tape that, and that is the shots that you see in my story, the pictures. And we do that, and then we come back to the station, and we do what we call log our bites. And we sit down in an edit bay and watch the tape that we just shot, that we taped out in the field. And I will look through that whole tape, and I will look at the shots that the videographer taped. I will look at the interviews, and I will write down the parts of the interview that I will want to use. And I'll also make a note of if there's a really pretty shot or something that I can use words to write to, then I will look at that, and I will kind of note where that is on the tape. So that is how you get your ideas for formulating a story. Bob, he always tells people that come to the station, it's like fitting a puzzle pieces together. Because we'll conduct maybe a 20-minute long interview and use 30 seconds of it and cut a 15-second, we call them sound bites, a 15-second part of the interview here and a 15-second part of the interview here, and then we kind of tell the story with pictures and words in between.
Now, once you have got what you want, what you're going to present, is that checked by anybody, or is
Yes.
it left up to you?
It is checked. Bob either checks it, or our assistant news director, who is Amy Bingham, she checks it. And what they do is they read over, especially on stories where we really need to worry about if there's any question as far as the law is concerned, liability issues. They read over those with a fine-tooth comb and make sure everything has attribution, everything is correctly worded legal-wise. And also, they fact-check. They'll look at it. Are you sure it happened on this day? Are you sure it had this many customers? And they'll ask us so we think twice before it airs, because that's a mistake you can't make.
Allison is one of the few that rarely gets any marks on her stories, though. I mean, they'll come in there. Rarely do we change stories that Allison does. There are some young reporters that need, maybe the ending should go in the middle, or we just move some pieces around. But it really is like putting a puzzle, and that's what makes this job is fun, because every day there's a deadline, very high stress, but every day at 5 o'clock our story better be ready, or else it obviously doesn't make the air, and then we'll have to deal with that.
Who decides what news you're going, or what events you're going to cover and make the news?
We have a morning meeting with the reporters and the producers at 9:30, and the photographers, and we'll go over story ideas. In fact, today, Allison, we used 2 or 3 of your story ideas today. We were up in Park City. Doing a story there.
I saw that.
Yes.
So we kind of just all put our heads together. On most days, we'll have what we call a day file. It's a file just with press releases or story ideas. The reporters make what's called a beat call, where everyone has, they call the police departments, sheriff's departments, fire departments, coroner, hospitals,
Boards
school
of
superintendent.
education.
And we get a lot of story ideas that way. We also listen to the scanner each day, and if there's a fire or an accident somewhere, we'll go out and cover it. So we put all that together, and we try to divvy it up. Allison may go cover 2 or 3. We'll give another 2 or 3 stories to Leslie, and try to do it in their areas of expertise. Now, Allison is our agriculture reporter. We joke about it because she has some good ties to the farming community, and there's really no one. A lot of people like me who come from New York. What do I know about farming? So we rely on people like Allison who have a knowledge of it, and if there's a story to have to do with tobacco and tobacco prices, I'm going to put Allison on it because she has some working knowledge about that.
Well, I noticed that sometimes the reporter does its own camera work, and other times there's a camera person with them. Who decides that?
We hire what's called, they're called one-man bands in the industry. And that really, it's like Chappie, it gives you, I think it gives you a lot more versatility. In Glasgow, instead of having a photographer and a reporter here every day, we have a one-man band here who is Vince McVeigh. And he goes and he shoots a story and conducts his interviews and then comes back and writes his stories. And it just gives you a little bit more versatility-wise. And there's some days when you need a photographer, when you're going on a big story, or if you're a one-man band, and Bob will say, you get a photographer today because you don't need to go down to Mammoth Cave with just yourself. And so.
Well, do all of you have some training and experience in photography?
I don't want to tell Bob if I do. No, we do. We all learn. If you get a journalism degree, you know how to run a camera. We have these state-of-the-art digital cameras now that if you asked me to turn on, I probably couldn't because I'm not familiar with them and I've never shot a story on them. I know the basics of camera work, that you need to white balance and check your audio levels and that kind of thing. But these new digital cameras, I honestly, I can say that I am ignorant as far as how to run those.
Good answer, Allison.
Thank you.
But I'm not crazy about one-man bands, but in a market this size, when we have budget restrictions, we have to do that. We have to send some of the men and women out there to tilt the camera around and put it on the shoulder. Ideally, you want to have a reporter concentrating and asking the questions and writing, a photographer concentrating just on the pictures. And hopefully beforehand, the reporter and photographer are going to communicate on how they're going to cover this story, what kind of shots they want. It's up to the reporter to write to that video.
How are your photographers trained, and where do you get them?
All are college educated.
All are college educated?
Yes, sir.
In journalism?
Yes. Yeah. Normally in broadcast journalism, or a lot of them have production backgrounds where they may have worked a studio camera in college, but they would also go out and shoot video with a reporter in college. So they make the determination when you go to school, you're either going to be the reporting side, the producing angle, or the photographer end. And we've been very fortunate with the program at Western. Northwestern is probably one of the best programs in the country, that and the University of Missouri. John Clark and Allison will debate that every day. But at Western Kentucky has a terrific program. I think they say it's considered one of the top 10 journalism schools in the country. And I love getting interns. It's free labor. They get credit for it. But I love getting the interns, and they get trained on how we do things. And then once graduation comes, when I lose somebody, I'll always try to go to those interns and get them in the door first, because they know the system, and they're well trained coming from Western.
Western has come up in the last 10 or 12 years as far as their work in journalism is concerned.
And I think that they're going to make even more strides as far as under Dr. Gary Ransdell. He has chosen the journalism department as a program of excellence at Western, which means they are really going to concentrate on building that program. They're building a new journalism technology building that's going to be right there on campus, state-of-the-art, new studios, new equipment, which is something that I think the program had been lacking. So I think that he really is going to push that program, and I think you'll see the ranking go even higher under his administration. He's really made a commitment to that school.
And part of the recruiting efforts, Dr. Terry Likes, there is a very big supporter of his students and tries to get them all interns at BKO. And he says what they're also doing is telling the students they're recruiting that you've got a good chance of doing something on the air at WBKO. If you come to our school, we'll train you, and probably the chances are you'll be able to work your way up and get a good resume tape, and then head up to Louisville or south to Nashville and get move to a bigger market.
Absolutely.
How many cameramen do you have?
We have 3 full-time cameramen right now. We have 2 one-man bands, one of whom is a woman, so a one-woman band. But we have 3 full-time camera people at the station.
And are all the reporters and so forth from journalism schools, or do you have somebody that's gotten in from outside?
Everybody is from a journalism school. Scott Padgett is probably, he's a meteorologist. His degree is in meteorology, but it went through the broadcast program. Gene Burke, John Clark, everybody on staff,
every one of us, which is contrary to what you used to hear news directors say. Diane Sawyer, she doesn't have a degree in broadcast journalism. Connie Chung.
Yeah, I know. That's one reason I'm asking the question.
They had always told people you don't have to, but I think that this business is really changing as far as that's concerned, because we don't have time to teach people, really. We have time to teach them the intricacies of telling a good story and honing your skills, but you need to have those skills when you hit the door, because most small markets don't have time to teach you, honestly. And so if you had the choice between hiring someone who could come in and know immediately what a VO or a VOSOT or a package or a VO byte or a sound byte, you'd want to hire that person, because you don't have to take the time to explain what all of this is and start from scratch, really, because broadcast students, you spend 4 years learning the intricacies of that, and it's you get the real life experience, and that makes it all hit home. But I think this business is really changing as far as you need to have a degree, I would say. You're on the hiring end.
Absolutely. And I think the important things for the parents who may be watching this or high school students, the big thing is to get an internship under your belt. Going to if you want to get into radio or television or newspaper, you have to get that internship to get your foot in the door and to learn the language. And sort of in law, if you don't know what a tort or you're not going to get very far. But in our business, an internship is very, very important. We've got a fellow on staff. He's a sophomore in high school named Weston Crafton, and he's terrific. He goes to Franklin Simpson Middle School, and he does a weekly Teen Watch. It's on Monday nights at 6 o'clock, and he tackles some serious issues. It's just not what we call thumbsuckers. Tonight he did one on teens who don't sleep much, and it's showing up in the classroom the next morning. They either have a tough time getting to school, or when they do, they're almost falling asleep. So we talked to the neurologist today. We talked to some students. We talked to a principal, and just there are some studies that are encouraging schools to try to push the school day back to start, say, at 11 o'clock in the morning and go to 5 in the afternoon, which I think is crazy personally. But kids should be able to get to bed.
But then it really does, I think if you want to be in journalism for maybe high school students who are out there, or middle school students who are out there watching, if that's something that you think that you want to do, you should sign up to be on your middle school newspaper or your high school newspaper or your high school video journalism class or your high school yearbook, because that experience just puts you one more step ahead. I did all of those things, and I was fortunate enough that Henry Royce, who owns WCLU here in town, came to me and said, would you do a weekly report on the radio for your high school? Absolutely. And so I got to do that here, and I learned how to write up a minute-and-a-half long broadcast for the Scotty Report, Glasgow Scotty Report. So I did that. I wrote a weekly column for the newspaper. And there are those opportunities out there for people who want to do it. And if you want to do it for free, I guarantee you somebody's going to let you do it. And
have you listened to your old tapes?
No, but I know that Jim Moody and Mr. Royce remind me constantly that they have my very first broadcast still on 8-track down there. So I'm sure it'll surface at some point.
It probably will.
If it hasn't already.
Knowing both of them, it will probably surface.
Absolutely.
You're correct. Who determines the time for broadcast? I'm talking about you allot so much for news, you allot so much for ads and so forth, and somebody's got to figure that all out.
It's usually the general manager will kind of set the agenda on what our newscast, how long it should be. We have 30-minute newscasts, except for at 10 o'clock we go 35 minutes. But in a typical newscast, we'll usually have about 8 minutes worth of commercials. That will leave another, say, 3.5 to 4 minutes for weather, another 3.5 minutes for sports. So we're up to 8, 12, 15, 16. So we're talking probably 12 minutes of news each night. And then you have a little time in between some that we kind of leave for chit-chat and things like that. But usually each night in a newscast, you're only going to see between 10 and 12 minutes of actual news. So on those stories, we may get a story today, for instance, the Warren County Parks and Recreation gave out its volunteer awards. We may give that 20, 25 seconds. The Park City story, we gave a minute and a half, maybe a minute 45. It's not a whole lot of time. If you sat down to read an article, say the front page of the Glasgow Daily Times, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would probably take you 2.5 minutes maybe to read that article. We cover that same story, and we've got to tell it in a minute to a minute and a half. And that's the challenge we talked about, putting that puzzle together.
Now, does the reporter, when they are doing the actual interviewing, do they know how much time they're going to have, or do you find out the time after you get back?
You know, generally, they will tell you, Allison, you're going to be a package for 6 o'clock. That means that I am going to put my voice and the interviews and the pictures all together in one piece. So the anchors will just read an introduction to my piece, and then my whole package will run. And that normally runs at a minute and a half. If it's a complicated story, a minute 45. If it's a really big story, you may get 2 minutes. So you have an idea. You always know when you get back to the station, how much time you're going to have. But the challenge is condensing, as Bob said, a huge story down to a minute and a half, and then also writing it where people can understand it. Because if I'm covering a court case, I can't use words that most of the general public are going to be sitting at home going, I have no idea what you're talking about. Because you really need to write it at a level that everyone can understand, because you don't have the luxury like a newspaper does. If someone doesn't understand it, they can go back, get the newspaper, check it out, and be like, okay, now I understand. They have to get it the first time or they miss it. And that's a challenge as a journalist. It's also a challenge to, as Bob always says, it's the WIFM test, what's in it for me? And you have to make people interested. You have to say, property taxes are going up in Adair County, let's say. Well, you need to find out how that's going to affect mom or dad, and really bring that story home and tell how it affects real people, because they don't understand if they hear legalese and you're going to get taxed 5%. You need to say, if you own a $100,000 home, this is how it's going to affect you. So that's the challenge.
Perfect example was our lead story tonight. Leslie Perino had the city of Biloxi, Bowling Green. I'm going back to Mississippi. Goodness gracious. The city of Bowling Green is talking about putting in cameras at different intersections. And they're going to try, they have to get the General Assembly to change the law to allow them to do that. But what they want to see is some people who may be going through red lights or may be speeding, they want to be able to get pictures of that license plate. And then in the mail, you would get sent a citation saying you were going 40 miles an hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone, something along those lines. And that is a perfect, what's in it for me. That affects people. Because I'm sure everyone has gone when the light is yellow and they want to make it through before it gets to red. That may change some people's thinking if the General Assembly changes the law.
And it's our challenge, too. If it's not interesting to you, you'll change the channel. You'll say, I don't understand that, and you'll change the channel. And the TV business is based on ratings, and we base our advertising dollars on how many people watch our station. And if you're not watching, we don't make money, and you can't pay the bills, and you have to let people go. So it's really a challenge. And as you said, when you only have 12 minutes of news, you really have to make people continue to watch. You don't want them to leave when there's a commercial and say, well, I'm going to flip over here and see what's on while they're on the commercial, and then they get interested in that show and they never come back. So that's a challenge for a news director, a producer, a reporter, is to keep people interested during that whole 30 minutes and keep your viewership, because that's how you make money in television.
And our challenge has also been to try to not make this seem like small market television. Just because we're in Bowling Green, Kentucky or Glasgow, Kentucky, doesn't mean we have to act like we only have 50,000 people in Bowling Green or 14 or 15,000 in Glasgow. We want to play with the big boys and make it have our look just as good as Nashville. And we're starting to do that with we have new graphics we put on the air. We have a new weather system we've purchased. We have a new first warn system in weather, and weather is becoming a priority for us. You saw the tornadoes last April, where now we purchased this new system that will instantly go off when there's a warning or tornado watch. Our picture will squeeze back. We call squeeze back, become smaller, and underneath it, the counties will run that are affected, and I have a little map there. Next month, we're purchasing a new $300,000 system, weather system, radar system, that will allow people to know at what minute the storm is going to arrive. We can say in Bowling Green at 7:14, it's going to hit you. In Glasgow at 7:21, it's going to hit you. We have what they call street level mapping. It's all this technology, but you could take a map of Glasgow and say there was a tornado on the street that you grew up. What street would?
Off South Green Street.
Off South Green. Our radar can zoom in on the map to that street, and we can say there was a tornado touchdown. All this neat stuff that we're finally purchasing, and it's going to make us a better station and make us look every good as good as Nashville.
In mentioning rating a while ago, you reminded me of something that I've wondered about. In one sense of the word, I understand actually it's done to make money, but I don't think it's good for your ratings, and that's your business of not having 6 o'clock local news on Saturday and Sunday. You're losing viewers, I'm telling you, because you get used to it. You find out that they got some good news channels in Louisville or some good news channels in Nashville, and I don't understand. It's only been, the station's only started doing it recently. I realize that with these informationals. I realize they make money for the station, but I don't think it helps your rating. But I don't ask either one of you to comment about it because that's not in your field.
No, we both kind of giggled about it because that affected Allison. She was our weekend anchor at the time, and it was purely a business decision. Especially in the summer, you're going to find not a lot of people watching an early newscast. It's light out, they're hanging out at Barren River Lake, or they're doing other things. And when the ratings aren't there, advertisers aren't going to advertise there. And I think the decision was made that, from a business standpoint, to put an infomercial in there. You know, from my point of view, I'd rather see news 24 hours on our station. But from a business standpoint, I guess it made some good business sense. But we had other battles to fight on that one.
I've wondered about it because it certainly doesn't help your ratings. I mean, I still, and I'm not the only one, but I still look at 6 o'clock news. If I don't get it Bowling Green, I either go to Nashville or Louisville. On Cablevision here in town, and I got stations in both towns.
And I think that's the challenge for a news agency is that you must realize that you serve the people and you serve the people's interest, and that's what we do on a daily basis. And we constantly tell people, if there's a story that you thought that we didn't cover correctly, email us, call us, talk to us about it, and maybe we missed your opinion. And so I think if people do have concerns, that's a concern that they can legitimately voice. And I think that you have seen a lot of changes at the station because of concerns that people voiced. Just like the first warn system, when people constantly said, "Why are your watches and warnings always behind Nashville?" And now they're not. And that took people calling and saying, I'm not going to watch anymore. I can't watch because this is really important. And so that's a management decision. There enough people call and they say, this is really a concern, we're going to address it. So I think that we always have to remember we serve our viewers, and if a viewer has a problem with the story that we've done or something, I think we always have an email site on our webpage, and we encourage people to let us know.
Well, you can tell management that I'm having troubles with informationals.
We have a terrific general manager, a fellow named Rick McHugh, that really cares about the people, the employees. But as Allison said, if anyone has any comments, please call, because management does react to that.
Absolutely. And he is very good. All of this technology and all of these purchases have come under his watch. Before, we had a lot of changes, and we had a wonderful general manager in Clyde Payne, who most people know here. And he really made a lot of improvements to the station. He purchased a new building, and we moved out to Russellville Road, and he was a news director, so he really funneled a lot of money into the news department, and I think that has continued with Mr. McHugh. He has a commitment to the news department, and he comes back there and wants to know what we're doing, and so he really listens to us and the concerns that we have. So that's nice as well. Most stations you never see the general manager, and we constantly see Mr. McHugh and also Mr. Payne, who's now a vice president with the corporation that owns us. He's still in Bowling Green, and he still stops in and says hello and comes back to the station. So
sometimes I see him more than I want to behind a closed door. So
it's like the principal's office, I guess.
Well, I doubt that, but that it's comparable to the principal office, but. Because now I don't think the principal can do much anymore.
No, that's true.
And the business manager can.
Absolutely.
So that's why I say I don't think it's comparable to the principal anymore. Been an awful lot of changes there. Do you always read from let me rephrase this question. As you're doing the news, Are you reading from the monitor, or are you reading from your paper, or both?
Both. As a good anchor, you should be constantly, you see the pieces of paper that we have there that are on the set, and those are a copy of our scripts. And some nights there's breaking news where a story is inserted and you ad-lib that story. Someone's telling you in your ear, 4 people are dead, it happened on such and such street, and you're just you're not making it up, but you're telling the story right off the top of your head. But most nights you have a copy of your scripts, and you also hopefully have the scripts on the teleprompter, which is inside the camera, which is why we can constantly look at the camera. But you want to keep up with those scripts at all times, because it is a human running the teleprompter, and I used to run teleprompter, so I can say this. Sometimes you not fall asleep, but get kind of into the story, and you're not caught up with the anchor. So you really do have to keep up with those scripts. And you don't want to have what's called prompter lock, which is what they call anchors who stare into the camera and never look down. And, I think one tip Bob is always given to our anchors is keep up with your scripts, and when there's a name or an age, take a natural look down, confirm the age, look back up. So you constantly keep up with your scripts. If you don't, you're going to get burned at one point or the other.
I had a neat story when I was in Hattiesburg, and it involves Whitney Van was off, and the producer was, and we had a new person filling in. It was our first time anchoring or co-anchoring, and the producer was so used to writing, good evening, I'm so-and-so, and I'm Whitney Van. Well, she typed it in that day, even though Whitney was off, and the person was so nervous about reading the teleprompter, she looked in there, and I said, I'm Bob Noonan, and the co-anchor said, and I'm Whitney Van, and her name was Kim Evans. She was just reading off the teleprompter, not thinking, and she just went on as if nothing happened. I was...
And there are some times when it's a hurried day, and you're trying to bang out those stories and get them typed in. And some days, as an anchor, you don't get to read those stories before on a perfect day, you get to read through them all and have a good feel and make the changes how you want to read them, look for typos. But some days you don't, and so if you're not paying absolute attention to what you're reading, you'll read the wrong thing. It'll be an and where there should be an and you have to read a little bit ahead and kind of edit in your mind what you're going to say. And an interesting thing that most people don't know is you're wearing an IFB in your ear, which is an earpiece where you constantly have someone talking to you while you're talking that you hear inside your ear. They're giving you time cues. They're telling you 10 minutes to the end of the show, you need to drop bump 1, and this next tape is not up, so skip to the next story. So you're listening to that while you're talking. So that's a hard part of the job to get used to as an anchor.
Well, now you're answering a question that I didn't phrase properly a while ago about timing. So you've got the earpiece there that helps you with the timing and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And we also have someone in the studio who's giving us either a floor director or a camera person who is counting us down. The anchor may be reading a script, and the person will be this, meaning wind it up. Let's get out of this. So we've got the lifeline to our producer telling the anchors in the ear, but also someone right in front of us on a camera saying, you have this much time. So there are a lot of backups.
Because if you don't hit those time constraints, I anchor the 5 o'clock. We have 5 o'clock to 5:30, and that's all we get. And if we can't go into Peter Jennings, and so if you're not done, you're not done, and it shuts off and it goes to Peter Jennings. So people at home think, now, what happened? John and Allison didn't come back and say good night, and it was great to have you with us. So that's why you constantly have to watch your time, and every little second has to be accounted for. If you're a minute and a half over, you start dropping stories, and you start saying, you make a decision, okay, which is the most important story? What do people want to hear about most? We're keeping that. This goes.
Or we go to weather, and instead
Right.
of 3.5 minutes, Jeff may only get 3 minutes
Right.
if we're running a little long. Same thing with sports. If Jason gets 3.5, 4 minutes, then he may have to drop 1 or 2 stories in order for us. Unfortunately, the people at the bottom end of the show suffer
Take the brunt of it.
because the front end sometimes goes a little long.
Well, if you're running short, all you got to do is turn it over to Jeff.
Yes, sir.
He can.
Yes.
He is. He can fill the time. And that's the challenge. Some nights you're light. Some nights you're going into the newscast and maybe a story that you were counting on didn't make it and didn't make it in time for the news. So they're saying stretch it out, and you add a weather block in at the end. You come back and say, Jeff has a complete look at our forecast and just update you one more time if you need to take your umbrella to school tomorrow. No, Allison, we don't. And that's all unscripted. And I've had times when they've come back and said, okay, you have 2 minutes, fill it. And that's what you've got to do. And you go to sports and say, Chris, can you tell me, recap real quickly who won the Daytona 500 or who did this? And he'll tell you. And okay, UK won tonight, yes. And that's so it's there's the other side to it too.
We try to limit that. I'm not crazy about the chit chat, the small talk. I think people are too smart to, have us try to cover for a minute and a half and tell them stuff that's not important to their life. I'd rather give a lot of news, and then, come out, maybe have 15 seconds at the end of the show and just say goodnight, everybody.
And that's a change that I think that if you watch the station a lot, hopefully you watch a lot, that the changes that you've seen really since Bob has gotten here in the past year is he came from a large market comparably to Bowling Green. Jackson is a market 70. Bowling Green is a market 180 or 170, high 170s, 180. And that means Jackson is the 70th largest market in the country. Bowling Green is the 180th largest market in the country. And to give you an idea, it just goes to about 212.
Right.
And so Bob had come from Jackson where they really concentrated a lot on story count. We used to only maybe have 4 or 5 stories in what we call the A block, which is the first block of news before we go to commercial break. We maybe only had 4 or 5 stories. Now in our 10 o'clock news, we'll have 15 stories. And we have, 15 minutes of news. And he times it out. He'll time it out and say, that was great. You had 11 minutes of news in that first block before you went to commercial, which is what Nashville does, which is what Louisville does. And we were in commercials when they were still doing news. And Bob said, we can't do this. So we really worked on, and Bob worked on getting our story count up, covering more news that's important to you at home. And we've really, I think, done a better job in the past year of getting out of Bowling Green. Because I'm not going to lie to you, as a reporter, it's easy to stay in Bowling Green. You do your story, you hop back to the station, half an hour, get it done. But I think we've really concentrated on getting outside of Bowling Green, coming to Glasgow more, Franklin, Logan County, Jamestown, places that are in our viewing area that count on us to cover their news, and we can't ignore that because they're our viewers. So I think in the past year we've really done a good job of getting out there, getting the news, getting more stories.
I think all of us can walk away proud, say that we work at BKO. And I don't know if it was always like that.
What brought about the 5 o'clock news?
That was before my time, but apparently, were you
I was
producing at that time? Apparently, I think it was because Nashville was doing it, and the stations in Louisville, well, they came out an hour earlier than us anyway. But to be honest, probably a business decision as well. They saw that there was a half an hour there that they can get another 8 minutes of commercials. But I think there was a need for an early news. We're showing Andy Griffith at 5 o'clock instead of the newscast. I think there are some priorities are wrong.
Well, I don't disagree with you. I think it's fine, but I just wondered why all of a sudden they came with the 5 o'clock news, and they never had for years.
I think it was because the other markets that were coming in on cable were doing it, and we were losing. We feared losing an audience. If they leave us at 5 o'clock, they may stick with NBC in Nashville for 5:30 and their 6 o'clock news. So I think it was a decision based on that we had to get in the game.
And I think in the news business, you really have to look at the niches where your market is, because our newscasts are tailored really toward the viewers that we have. Bob gets ratings books back after every ratings period, which we're in one right now, which is February, and he will get a book back, and it shows how many women 30 to 45 are watching the 5 o'clock news during this time. And Bob has learned from our ratings books, and our general manager, Rick McHugh, has learned from our ratings books that a large majority of our 5 o'clock viewing audience is maybe an older audience, is maybe a lot of women, and stereotypically they're home. And that's who we cater that newscast toward. We have a lot of medical news, we have a lot of women's issues, and we also have a lot of national news. So in case you're going out and getting dinner at 5:30, you're not going to miss the top national stories of the day. And so I think that in midday is catered a lot toward women, and AM Kentucky is catered a lot toward a lot of maybe rural families who are getting up at 5:30 in the morning. We have commodities prices, and we have things that you need to know when you get up that early in the morning.
Especially weather.
Absolutely.
Everyone wants to know what the weather. We try to treat the morning a lot like radio, where people are not sitting down for 90 minutes and watching our newscast. We know they're shaving, they're fixing breakfast for the kids, they're taking a bath, or where they're just listening. So we try to really pump up the weather during that time because people want to know what to dress, their children in,
and the time.
And the time.
We constantly say, it's 7:45, welcome back to AM Kentucky. So people who are listening can say, oh, it's 7:45, I've got to give it, it's my time to walk out the door. And that's what people constantly want to know. Is it going to be nice? Do I need a coat? And what time is it? And that's what people want to know in the morning.
I don't get to see the 5 o'clock news too much.
Shame on you.
It's much improved over the past 3 weeks.
Well, I have noticed, and I have seen enough of it that, and I've seen you there also already. But I have noticed that you do have some national news in it as a rule, and I think that's good because there are most of the time when I see it, I leave the office early because I'm going to be doing something at night, also.
Right.
And I probably am going to miss the 6:30 national news. And that's when I mostly see your 5 o'clock news.
What we've also put in the 5 o'clock is some regional news. We've tried to make it, you're getting your national news, want to know what's going on in Tennessee and up in Indiana. And then we also we sprinkle it with a little local, more as a tease to get people to watch our 6 o'clock news.
If you're, in my judgment, and I'm just a layman as far as the news is concerned, but in my judgment, if you're short anywhere on news, it's on news out of Frankfurt, the capital.
And that's something that we've talked about. I mean, Allison pushed to go to Frankfurt a lot last year. And we went to the opening day of the session in '98 and really didn't make it back. We relied on WHAS, our ABC affiliate up in Louisville, or TVQ, the ABC affiliate in Lexington, where we get satellite feeds each day of stories. But a lot of times they weren't stories of statewide interest. They were more stories of their local issues. I'd love to establish a full-time bureau, and hopefully I'd love to have a goal of the next 3 years to establish a bureau up there, and we'd have nightly live reports. But
I think we're shortchanged in this area insofar as the news out of the state capital is concerned.
And that's what the larger markets do. WLKY in Louisville, they have Chris Gilligan, who is in Frankfurt all the time. And that's a luxury that you can have as a larger market, because if Bob sends me to Frankfurt, he loses me for a whole day and I'm going to do one story. Whereas if I were in Glasgow, I'd be doing 3 stories. So he has to look at it from a management standpoint of what am I going to fill my newscast with. And so it really is manpower. It's the unfortunate circumstance that as a small market, we can't go to Frankfurt every day. And we do try, but again, it's with a smaller station. It takes us sometimes a little more time, because if he sends me out, then that means I'm gone, plus the photographer's gone, and if anything happens during the day, then we're going to miss the news of the day here. So that kind of plays into it as well.
I don't know the solution. I just know it's
adding staff would be a big help, but it's we're limited, but that's part of the fun part of the job too. It's trying to do a lot with a little.
Now, something that has intrigued me before either one of you were at the station is usually on the 6 o'clock news, and I don't know whose idea this is. One will start a sentence, one anchor, and the other one will finish it. Why?
Well, usually it's...
Whose idea is that?
It's the way the business has evolved. It's a trend. It's something consultants came up with. Consultants are very big in the television industry. Now, we don't have consultants at our station, but we do follow trends. And when you have a dual anchor, you don't want to, for example, on Allison's story tonight on bullies, it was what we call a two-anchor lead. Gene started it off, and Amy finished it.
Yeah.
And normally we'll have one of the anchors turn to a single shot. Okay, we'll have a two-shot, then one anchor. Otherwise, you just have one anchor kind of looking at the other, staring, and it looks very uncomfortable. But it probably started with a consultant thing, to answer your question.
And they want to include both people in the newscast, because a lot of times I think when you see those double anchor leads, it's a transition between two stories where you may have been covering a fire or a murder, and then you need to switch to a lighter story, so you turn, and I turn, and John and I have, it's a kind of a lighter feel to it. And I think when we have the stories in the second block, you want both anchors up there because it looks like one anchor disappeared for a whole block of news if you don't see that anchor. So I think that's kind of how it evolved, as assuring the audience she's still here, she didn't leave, she's going to be back, and I think including it and having some sort of rapport. And it's a transition. We don't do it on every story, and we do it when we first come on. Good evening, everyone. I'm Allison Gardner. I'm John Clark. Thanks for joining us.
We've got about 30 or 15 seconds. So
okay. That went quickly.
Thank both of you for coming. I've enjoyed it, and it's been very informing, and I'm sure the public has enjoyed it.
Well,
Thanks again.
Thank you for having us, Mr. Barrickman.
Thank you.